In this video, I'm going to make a small wooden Christmas tree and hopefully give a few tips so that you can make your own. I'm starting, as usual, with offcuts, and these are from an oak bird table I made earlier this year. To start, I'm taking 2 of the sticks and figuring out what I want the angle for the top of the tree to be, and then I'm setting my sliding bevel to that angle. It's not really important what that angle is specifically, just that it feels right. Next, I want to get all of these little pieces the same dimensions, and I'm going to make a jig to help me do this. It's a simple jig which consists of a piece of plywood that's just a little wider than the plane I'm going to use, and then 2 thin strips glued to either edge. I'm also adding a little stop piece to hold the bits of oak in place while I plane them. The idea here is that as I plane each piece, eventually the edges of the plane will rest on the plywood edges, and I won't cut the sticks any further. Obviously, whatever thickness you make the jig will determine the finished thickness of your sticks, which in my case is 12mm. You can actually hear when the plane stops cutting, and that's when you know you've reached the correct thickness. And once you've done one, it's just a case of working through the rest. Now, this task could absolutely be done without the jig. It would just take a little longer. Doing it this way makes getting things accurate and square very easy. And it's also quite therapeutic. Once I have all my sticks at the right dimensions, I take one of them and make a mark roughly in the middle with the angle I set on the sliding bevel earlier. But just this one stick for now, and you'll see why in just a second. Okay, so I've got all of these sticks cut to a nice consistent thickness, and they're nice and square on all sides, thanks to the jig. And the last thing you saw me do was cut an angle on these 2 pieces. Now, this angle is the angle that I set earlier on the sliding bevel, and it's the one I'm using for the top of the tree, and it's different to all of the other angles. And that's going to help me set the angle for all of the other cuts that I need to make. So what I can do now is measure down an equal distance on each piece, or each side. And in this instance, I'm going to do 9cm. And I'm just making this up. It doesn't have to be accurate. It's just what we feel like doing. And then, making sure those 2 are in the same place, I will line up my ruler on both of those marks, draw a line across, and those lines are where I would make my first cut. And what I can now do is I can bring in my sliding bevel, and set it to that same angle. And now I know that that is set at the right angle to make all my marks, all my cuts for the rest of the tree. Once I've trimmed the 2 top pieces to length, I can then move on to cutting the rest of the tree pieces, which is easy with the angle now set. And again, we don't need to know the specific angle in degrees as long as our sliding bevel is set. There's no complicated maths to work out. I made the lower tree pieces just a little longer as I thought that would look a bit better. And something else I thought would look a little better would be adding little spacer pieces in between these gaps here. I could have glued the whole thing together now, but I thought the whole piece would have a better silhouette with the spacer pieces. So I marked up some thinner pieces, cut them, planed them, this time just using the vise, and then cut again using the same angle. Before gluing things together, I gave everything a quick sand to make sure there were no furry edges left by the saw, and to remove any pencil marks which will be tricky to remove after it's all been glued together. The glue up wasn't an easy process, and I've sped up the footage here to about 6,000% so you don't have to see the whole process. But in summary, I should have made a better plan and not bothered with the clamps. Okay, so it's all glued up now and held together using this blue tape. I did start using these clamps, but it wasn't going very well. And usually for intricate glue ups like this, tape is pretty handy. Once it's dry, we'll take one of these other sticks that we've got and glue that on as a bottom piece. Then I'm gonna get another offcut, which I've got plenty of up there, and create a little base that the whole thing can sit on top of. And then it'll basically be done. I decided to keep the base very simple, essentially just a thicker block of oak which I cut using an old saw. I would like to get some better hand saws in the future, and also learn how to sharpen them. But for now, I'm not going to let tool envy get in the way. This trusty old saw will do the trick. Just a little bit slower. I gave the block a quick plane to remove the saw marks, and then marked a slot where the base will fit. I kept things simple here and just used a chisel to pare down a few millimeters to give the base piece somewhere to locate. It's worth bearing in mind that to do this properly you do need a good sharp chisel. And once that was done, I gave all the edges a light chamfer with the plane. Okay, now it's time to check our tree glue up and get all the tape off, which is oddly satisfying. It looked pretty good, but there were just a few rough areas and dried on glue to clean up, which I did with a mixture of sandpaper and chisels. Here I just took a strip of sandpaper and taped it to a nice flat board. Then I could rub the tree back and forth and get things nice and flat. Another oddly satisfying process is clearing glue off with chisels. But it's probably not very good for the chisel. I also gave the bottom a little sand as it didn't quite sit flat, and this made a pretty annoying noise, so I'll just skip to the end where it worked. Nice and flat. On to the final stages now, and one of the last steps is cutting the base down to the correct size, which is easier now that the rest is glued together as I know exactly how wide it is. I just made a mark using the sliding bevel again for the angle and trimmed it down. Then it was time for the last few bits of glue to bring the whole piece together. And, with the magic of editing, it's already dry. So, I can remove the tape, give things a last little sand, add some festive lights, and it's done. If you want to see more projects made with offcuts, then check out my other videos, including the bird table, which is where the offcuts for this project came from. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Merry Christmas, and thanks for watching.